Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. This is Dash Rendar. On today's video and my continued quest to give you examples of warriors in history that are not the Spartans, Vikings, Romans, or samurai even, I give the warrior that spoke softly and carried a big stick, the Gallowglass. Now, to set the pace about these fierce warriors, I thought it'd be fun to read a passage of one of their battles. In the County Meath in Ireland, 1423, the English army, knights, yeomen, halberds, and billmen, under Richard Talbot, Lord Deputy of Ireland and Archbishop of Dublin, stood arrayed in the field, bracing for the Irish attack. Suddenly, an advance of skirmishers, unarmored and barefoot, rushed forward, hurling their light spears at the English ranks as they ran back to their lines. A swift advancing wall of iron-helmed Celt giants descended upon the English, screaming their battle cries, squealing of bagpipes. Each man carried a battle axe, and their momentum, bulk, and determination carried them easily through the English ranks as they skillfully wielded their terrible weapons to deadly effect. The name Gallowglass stemmed from the Gaelic Gallowglach, which roughly translated means foreign warriors. Warriors came from Scotland and traveled over to Ireland around the 13th century, where the first recordings of them began. So what did these fierce warriors do? Well, they lived for war. Scottish historian Fergus Cannon said they lived for war. Their sole function was to fight, and his only contribution to society was destruction. They were in fact a true martial society. In fact, none of them had any day-to-day jobs, so to speak of. They were basically held on retainer under a lord, and they were given the ability to just train. So they weren't farmers, simply a warrior culture and a warrior for hire. On campaign, each Gallowglass generally had two knaves with him, which were two younger warriors or soldiers, one to carry provisions and one to carry the weapons. And that was actually known as a spar. Good. In the 14th century, they were generally armed with a dirk, two spears, and a bow. But later in the 15th and 16th century was when the big boys came to play. That was the claymores and the huge axes. Now, unfortunately, I don't have one to show you, but it was a large axe named a sparth, and an English chronicle was quoted as saying it was deadly where it lighteth, or deadly where it lay. One of the things that set them apart, aside from their strictly martial society, is that they were heavy infantry. Now, in the time, there was a lot of light infantry, and then the royalty rode cavalry. But I think the Gallowglass decided that if you can't wield something like this from a horse, then a horse isn't worth riding. The claymore itself has a lot of misconceptions in society. One of it being it was used by William Wallace. You know, that was more 13th, 14th century. These didn't come out until the 15th, 16th century. But the other thing is that the idea they are slow. These can be wielded very quickly, and they're multifaceted. They have the ability for a murder strike, which is when you're bringing it over and you're coming over the top of someone. They can be swung quickly in an overhead arc. They can be pummel strike. They are very universal and not just a big piece of metal just to go up and down with. As far as armor goes, they were heavily armored for the time with a padded gambeson and then a skirt or a large thing of mail on top of that. Now, quick sidebar, we're gonna talk about the difference between mail, about butted mail and riveted mail. Now for the riveted mail, these two holes are older holes, but you can see that it dented it a little bit here, but it held together really well because these are flat riveted. Whereas the butted mail, you can see on that impact, they just broke apart. So round butted mail is really not gonna do much aside from just like playing LARP. It's not gonna protect you from anything. So I know what you're thinking. Didn't you just say they wore the mail on the outside? And yes, they did. This mail, however, is not fit well for me, so I can't fit over this. It's relatively tight, but this is just to help visualize a point. Now, they would also have protection for the neck, and they would wear a large iron helmet. They were referred to as the largest and fiercest of warriors. They were tall, broad in stature, and strong. And so their iron helm actually had a crest on it just to make them look that much bigger and more intimidating in battle. What was their function? Well, probably what's the coolest name for a mercenary contract. They operated in what was called the Scottish habit, which means they were generally put on retainer for about 3 months. And oftentimes they were used as a personal guard for the nobility because they didn't have any ties to the rivalries between the Irish clans. How were they used in battle? Well, they were invaluable in the most dangerous parts of the melee. Because of their superior weapons, armor, skills, and training, they could outperform a lot of the lighter infantry that were on the field. They could help hold those valuable strategic positions. However, one of the drawbacks of being freelance is that they often found themselves on opposing sides of the battlefield. The bloodiest battle in Irish history was the Battle of Knockdown, which literally translates to Hill of the Axes because so many of them were killed on that mountaintop. While the Gallowglass started off as Norse and Scotsmen, by 1512, there was a lot of Irish in the ranks as well. So it's not just necessarily a people group at that time. It became more of warrior of renown. So what happened to them in history? Well, in the 16th century, the advent of firearms became more prolific, and that really put a kibosh in much of their ability to be as fierce and effective as they were. It came in the 16th century when the English basically tired of the mercenary group and they went on a purge. And even some of them who had retired and made it to green pastures were unfortunately caught up in that, and they were put out to pasture, so to speak, putting an end to the fierce warriors. However, their legend still lives on today with the weapons they fought, the armor they used, and the tactics that they had. They're a great example of a purely martial society. And while it's not something I would suggest that you embody, because as with all guns for hire, they didn't have the most, don't have the most altruistic nature. They were prone to raiding and doing all sorts of unseemly things. They're a great example of a purely martial society that was renowned for their prowess in battle and feared throughout all of Ireland, Scotland, and England. If you guys enjoyed the video, this is kind of the dream I have for this channel in the future. I've always been fascinated by warrior cultures that aren't as mainstream. And so right now it's kind of like I'm using the weapons that I have that are somewhat similar to it, but I'd love someday to go down the road to different cultures. Just don't get as much screen time as the ones that are kind of prevalent in pop culture. So if you guys like the video, please be sure to let me know. If you have other ideas for different warrior cultures you'd love me to highlight. Again, this is like a passion project of mine, and I would love to use this channel just to kind of share different parts of history that aren't as prolific in a lot of media. So comment, like, subscribe. That sounds so stupid saying that. And I hope you have an amazing day. This is where having long hair is kind of dangerous. Oh, nice. Didn't pull any hair out that time.